I want to start out, I want you to, I want to put this whole class in perspective. And for those of you who've taken it before, you've gone through this, so no big deal, but it might be a little bit jarring for those of you who didn't. I was speaking to one of our job hackers the other day, and she was real nice about it. She said, when you gave that first talk at the first class, I thought it was kind of BS. She's nicer than that. I forget better words. Now I've been through it. I think there's something to it. So that was pretty cool when I get that kind of confirmation. But what I want you to do is this whole class is really, for me, about seeing the world differently. And if we can do that, and that's a really tough thing actually for human beings to do. If we can do that, you're going to be successful. If we have trouble with it, then it might be a little difficult for you, because that's the way I'm going to teach this class. I'm not going to teach recipes. I'm going to teach, the underlying principles and things of that nature. But interestingly enough, the way we view the world actually is the world to us, right? Our perception is our reality. And I want you to just imagine, and you close your eyes if you want to. I mean, if you're afraid you're going to fall asleep, don't. But I want you to try to imagine the world way back before the invention of the microscope, because I think this is a really good kind of thought experiment and a good metaphor for the class. All that we could see are things that with the naked eye, so to speak. That was our world. That was our perception of the world. So when you look at a drop of water, it's just a drop of water, right? And the world, I think, in some respects, is pretty small. But the day after we invent the microscope, right? This is, I don't know, 1500s or something like that, way back when. Did the world change? The world outside, did it change a lot? It really didn't, right? In 24 hours, I doubt a lot of things changed in the 1500s, right? From one day to the next. But what changed is our ability to access the world. And that changed everything for human beings. Because now, instead of just a drop of water, it is, paramecium and amoebas and all that fun stuff you learned in biology in high school, right? It's bacteria. We now have the germ theory for disease. We now have physicians starting to understand that they need to wash their hands so that we don't spread disease. So our world changed that day, even though the world outside didn't change. And this is a very fundamental understanding that I hope you all can grasp, is that the way we perceive the world changes the world, even though the world itself outside does not change. I'm going to call it the objective world, the world outside our perceptions. I believe it exists. I mean, there's some people philosophically say, if we don't experience it, it doesn't exist. I think it exists. I think when I die, you'll still be here, right? That's really important. Think about a telescope too. A telescope opens the heavens to us. We see things differently than before. We realize that we're not the center of the universe. We realize that we're not the center of our own solar system, right? Because now we can see things differently. So when we see things differently, the world changes. And that's what this is about. Now, I'm going to refer to these many times throughout the class as lenses, right? Because lenses is a good metaphor, or mental models. And it's not that you don't see the world without microscopes. And it's not that you don't see the world without telescopes. You just don't see it in as much detail. You don't see it maybe as clearly, right? Some of you, I'm looking, some of you are wearing glasses, right? I'm assuming that you could see the world without those glasses. I'm assuming that you could probably drive a car without those glasses, but I'm guessing that if you drove that car late at night and it was rainy and it was dark and there were no street lights and somebody in dark clothing ran in front of your car, there might be a problem, right? Because you might not see them. So we can see the world, not perfectly. We never can see the world perfectly, but this class is about seeing the world a little more clearly. Because when we can see the world more clearly, not only do we have a new reality for ourselves, but we also have the ability to be more effective in it. The thing that I see a lot, I want to talk about optimization in this class. The thing that I see a lot is that people think they're successful, and that because they're successful, that they're seeing the world 100% clearly. We never see the world 100% clearly. We're not capable of doing it. But two, I want to see the world as clearly as possible. So I'm going to ask you over the next 6 weeks to try to accept and use these different lenses yourself and see how the world changes for you. And I know I've been doing this for a while now. I know it will change for some of you. And it's those who are willing to accept these new lenses. So I know that sounds a little strange way to start a class, but hopefully you get where I'm going with this. There's a guy named Simon Sinek. Some of you might be familiar with. He has a YouTube video that's seen by millions of people. He says, it starts with why, right? Which is a great way. This, again, when we talk about different mental models or different lenses, that's a great way to look at the world, because this is the way we behave as human beings. We react to why. I've been through a lot of Agile classes and Scrum classes, and what they teach is they teach what or how. We're going to teach some of that, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is why. Why do we do this? Why does this matter? Why do we get up at 7:30 in the morning in our discretionary time to teach this stuff? Right? And the volunteers with it. And why do we get people who show up here multiple times, like my good friends Ely and Rob and Peter and Mia and Pam and others? Here's the why. And this is the most important piece. If we're able to take the Agile philosophy and make it part of our daily existence and the existence of those around us, our organizations, our teams, our divisions, whatever it may be, even our families. When we take this new philosophy, when we take these new lenses, these new mental models, apply them to our lives, everyone's life gets better. Not everybody in the world, but everybody who's associated with Agile and Scrum. We can make a better world. I know that sounds really, really strange and probably a bit Pollyannish, or I don't know what the word is, overly optimistic, but I've seen it happen. Because if we're able to take these new lenses and new ways of looking at the world, and I'm going to talk about software development because that's where I spent, my last 20 plus years. But you might be in marketing, you might be in education, you're in different things. It's okay. You're smart people. I know this because I've had you in my class before, even if it's not been you particularly. You're going to be able to take what I'm saying and map it to what you do. But I'm going to talk about software development because that's what I do. If we are able to take Agile and Scrum, right, in this Agile philosophy and apply these new mental models and lenses and actually use them in our daily life, we're going to be able to deliver more value to our customers sooner. So our customers' lives get better. When we talk about whose life, who's everyone, our customers. They're going to have problems that need to be solved, whether it be through your marketing, your education, your software. And you're going to be able to take and determine the value that you can provide to them, and you're going to deliver it to them, and you're going to do it sooner, and you're going to do it with higher quality. And when you deliver higher quality and higher value to your customers sooner, what happens? Well, the company makes more money. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with making money. Companies could I always say there's some companies out there who do really good things in the world. And there's some companies who don't do good things in the world. But if the company is doing good things in the world, they should continue to exist. And making money is like oxygen to that company. That's what they need in order to survive, in order to breathe, in order to thrive. This is one of the reasons why I get paid to be an Agile coach. Because if I couldn't help the company make more money, why would they pay me? It wouldn't make sense, right? And if our companies make more money, our shareholders make more money. The people who invest in our companies make more money. That may not matter to you, or it may matter to you. It depends, because sometimes when we're working with a company, they give us shares. They give us a piece of the company. And if the company does better, then we do better. I remember some years back, I got my one and only so far trip to India. I went to Hyderabad, and it was for work. And I gave this presentation, almost exactly the same as I'm giving to you, to about 150 software developers in Hyderabad, India. And I said, show me by, show me by raising your hand, how many people care if the company or the shareholders make more money? And I didn't get a lot of hands. Because that probably doesn't matter much to you either. I mean, of course, you want your company to still be in business, but you probably don't care too much overly about the shareholders. Maybe a little bit about the company. What you really care about is you care, one, about yourself, but you also care about the people doing the business, doing the work. This is the number one reason. Remember, I told you the reason I get paid when we talk about why is because I can make the company more money. The reason I do what I do, the reason that I get passionate about what I do, is because when I am able to help them to take these mental models and lenses and make them part of their daily lives, their lives get better. The lives of the people doing the work. And this is important, by the way, because you're all familiar with Gallup, this little polling organization. They've done, did I get the right one? I think it was Gallup. They've done an employee engagement survey. Jim's giving me the thumbs up. Sometimes I forget because I'm getting old. They do an employee engagement survey. They've been doing it for decades now. And they say, are people engaged in their work? And I know we've got people from all kinds of different countries, which is great. I think this is awesome. But you know how us Americans are. We're very proud to be American, wave the flag and all. America's number one in employee engagement. That's the good news for us Americans. But here's the bad news. It's only about 1 in 3 people. That to me is a tragedy. It is not only a national tragedy, but it's a worldwide tragedy that less than 1 in 3 people, less than 1 in 3 people worldwide are engaged in the work that they do. We spend more time with our jobs than we spend with our families a lot of times. We spend more time doing our jobs than doing our hobbies and the things that we say we love. The only other thing that comes close is sleeping. I like to sleep. Right? So it's really important if we can bring to the world engagement, people who are engaged with their jobs. And I've seen it. I've been doing this now for over a decade, and I've seen it. I've worked with hundreds of teams over the years, and I've seen people become more engaged in their work because they are delivering higher value and higher quality sooner to the customers, because that's what people want to do. People want to do good work. A lot of times, management doesn't allow us to do the quality work that we can do or bring the value that we're capable of bringing. Agile helps unleash that. I always tell the story of down in San Antonio, Texas. I was on a contract, and I got the wonderful opportunity to work with Innovation Group. And like all innovation groups, they stuck us in the basement out of the way. It's a great place to be, where people can't bother you. And we had this gentleman who shows up. He says to me one time, he says, Larry, you got any aspirin or Tylenol or something? I said, no, what's going on? He says, well, I've got a migraine headache. So you got a migraine headache, go home. He says, I don't want to go home. I want to stay here. I enjoy my job. I don't want to let my teammates down. That's an engaged worker, right? And Agile and Scrum is a big reason for it. The Agile philosophy. We're going to talk about Agile first. I'll talk about Scrum second. I want to talk about what is Agile. I want to talk about 3 Ps. The first P is the philosophy. That's what Agile really is. It's the Agile Manifesto. I'm going to spend some time with it this morning. It's 4 values and 12 principles. This is another thing that, as I've taken other people's training classes, they don't spend a lot of time with the philosophy. They want to get into what do we do. Forget about that. We're going to talk about that, but I want to get a solid basis in the philosophy. The second thing is the process. How do we take these good ideas and put them into practice? Because good words without good deeds don't matter, right? We need to have both. That was written in a book somewhere a long time ago. And then the third P for me is there are certain practices that we can do. What are some things that we can do that are particular to our domain? In software, there's certain things like extreme programming, behavior-driven development, continuous integration, continuous deployment. I'm not going to go a lot into the technical stuff. I know some of you are sweating, right? I'm not going to go too much into the technical stuff, but there are going to be some technical things that you can do in your particular domain, whether it be software development, marketing, advertising, education, et cetera. Knowledge work. If you wonder if you're a knowledge worker or not, if you can do your job over Zoom, you're probably a knowledge worker. That's a pretty good rule of thumb. And this Agile and Scrum is good for all types of knowledge work. So I want to talk about Agile and talk about the history of Agile. And this is follows the history of software development to a certain degree. It starts with something called waterfall. So how many people are familiar with waterfall? Raise your hand. So I see people smiling. They give me that smile like, ew, waterfall. This is waterfall right here. For those of you who are not familiar with it. This is the classic waterfall diagram. This is from page 2 of a PDF that you can find online if you want to. Just type in Winston Royce. It comes from a paper that he wrote back in 1970 called Managing Development of Large Software Systems. And this is figure 2 on page 2. It's just a screen capture of it. The interesting thing about this waterfall process is that he never really said anything about waterfall. He actually doesn't recommend this. Right underneath this picture, in this image, the classic waterfall image, he says, I believe in this concept, but the implementation described above is risky and invites failure. Because Winston Royce did not propose waterfall. What Winston Royce proposed is something that was pretty radical, and still I think is pretty radical. By the end of this document, and if you ever have insomnia, trouble sleeping, I encourage you to try to read it. It's about 14 pages long, but you'll be sleeping probably before you get to the end. He says, do it twice. His approach was more iterative. In fact, it doesn't look like this. He's got arrows going all over the place. To me, it's quite unintelligible, but that's his conclusion is do it twice. Do it once, and then everything you learned from the first time, start over from scratch and do it a second time. That's iterative. It's not the way I would do it, but it's still iterative. It's not really waterfall. Why do we get saddled with this waterfall process in software development? Well, interestingly enough, I always say, if you think one person can't change the world, they certainly can screw it up. There was somebody at the Department of Defense in the United States who saw Winston Royce's paper and said, hey, this would be a good way to do software development. Let's put it in our contract regulations for the federal government, for the Department of Defense. So people had to actually learn how to do software development this way in order to eat. Because back in the early days of software development, if you were going to make any money, you had to probably work with the government. So everybody followed suit with the government. We built a whole bunch of processes and things around waterfall. It didn't work very well, though. It was, as Winston Royce said, risky and invites failure. How much failure? How bad? Well, here's a couple studies. I'll go through them briefly. McKinsey and Company, in conjunction with the University of Oxford. Oxford is a good university. You know, I know it's a good university when they won't let me in. That's if I apply and they don't accept me, that's a good university. Quite a few good universities in the United States, by the way. This one happens to be in England. 2012, 17% of large IT projects go so badly that it threatens the very existence of the company. These are out there, and we've seen them. The National Institute of Health, I believe it is, or National Health Association or something in England. Is it NIH, I think is what it is. They rolled out the software. The other one, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, depends on which side of the aisle you're on, I suppose. They had a pretty poor web thing. The FBI Sentinel Project, the Denver baggage handling. There's been a bunch of examples of projects that have gone so bad they threaten the very existence of the company. On the average, IT projects are over budget, over time, and deliver less value than they were predicted to do. These are the lowest numbers I've seen. If you go to there's something called the chaos report. I don't go into it, but if you take a look at the chaos report, it talks about how poorly waterfall works for software development. 1 in 7 are, don't even get delivered, and the other 2/3 are challenged over budget and over time. Didn't work very well. They surveyed business executives in 2011. 75% respondents, these are business executives, people who are in charge. They admit that their projects are either always or usually doomed right from the start. There's a word for those. They're called death march projects, if you're not familiar with them. 55% feel the business objectives are clear to them, the people who are supposed to be leading it. Not doing a very good job. Less than 1 in 5 describe the requirements process as the articulation of the true business need, meaning we're not actually doing what we should be doing. And only 23% state they're in agreement with the projects are truly done. You've seen this before. We start out, and this is the thing about project management of products, which is really, really poor, is you have this kickoff meeting and you have all this fanfare and balloons and clowns or whatever, and you have this big party to kick off something. And then you get to the end, you run out of money, probably because you spent most of it on the party, but you run out of money and you run out of time. So you deliver what you've done, and you're supposed to deliver everything, but now you call it phase 1. And then you take everything that you didn't get and you throw it into phase 2 and you go back for more money, right? You've seen this before, some of you, because I see a lot of industry veterans out there, right? We've seen this before. There's another thing that we do. I call it project management chicken. That's where we use red, yellow, green, or sometimes I call it red, amber, green, because rig isn't as good as rag, though rig sounds about right because you're rigging it. The projects are all green until somebody has the courage to turn it yellow. And then the following week, the rest of them turn yellow, right? That kind of thing. That's project management chicken. If you want to be honest about it, you should probably start all projects in red because so many of them fail anyway. They're over time, over budget, and don't deliver what they say they're going to deliver. You should start them in red and they should earn their way back into green. I recommend you don't do any of that nonsense, but that's just me. So Agile was founded as a reaction to waterfall. This thing's not working. This is what I love about human beings. I'm like you. I'm kind of like you. I'm a human being. I have this love-hate relationship with human beings, right? And we do some extremely bizarre things from time to time, but then every once in a while we do something that's kind of, that makes sense. So what happens is, when human beings are doing something and it's not working out, every once in a while we get the good sense to say, let's try something different. And waterfall wasn't working out for software development. So a bunch of software developers said, hey, let's do something different. And they started doing different things. They started doing things that you've heard of probably before: Scrum, feature-driven development, pragmatic programming, DSDM, adaptive software development, even RUP. They started doing more iterative approaches. This is a scientific process. This is called empiricism. Try something out, see if it works, right? So the other thing wasn't working, let's try this thing out. So what happened is there's a bunch of them who were doing a bunch of different things, and they decided, hey, this was in 2001, by the way. So 20 years ago. They said, hey, let's get together. Let's talk about what we're doing. Let's write off a ski trip to Utah. That's what they did. February 11th through 13th. There's a bunch of folks, they went to Snowbird Ski Resort in Utah. They got together, and all that came out of it was this thing called the Agile Manifesto. And my own opinion, one is I used to joke about it being kind of an excuse for them to write off a ski trip and, and drink beer and have fun and go skiing. That's pretty much been confirmed. There's a guy named Alistair Coburn who said, yeah, basically we're just writing off a trip. I don't think they expected it would change the world the way it did, because I think they would have chosen a different word than manifesto. It's just not a really good word, especially after Unabomber. But anyway, these folks got together and they could only agree on a philosophy because they were all doing different things. They weren't all doing the same thing. They said representatives sympathetic to the need for alternatives to documentation-driven heavyweight software development got together and created this manifesto. So what is it? For those of you who haven't seen it, you can look it up, Google it. Some of you are familiar with it. Some of you have been through this before. They did a good job with wording it because it really has lasted. And the reason that it lasts is because it's a philosophy, right? It's a way of looking at the world, and that doesn't necessarily change much. This is what they say. We're uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. And there's a lot that they pack into some of these phrases. It's not that we have gone up to the mountain and we have received, you know, some kind of omniscience and we're going to tell you all how to do things, right? That's not what they're doing. I was an English major. I spent a lot of money to get my degree. Look at the tense of the words. It's a present tense. We are uncovering. We're constantly finding new things. We're constantly changing. We do not have revealed truth that we're going to give to you. We're searching, we're seeking, we're uncovering now. And the way we're doing is we're doing the work. And this is really important, right? Because if you're doing the work, you're going to know more about it. And that's why they even emphasize doing it. And here's the other thing. This is I've got almost an evangelical zeal for Agile, right? This philosophy, because we have found better ways and we're not going to leave people behind. We have found different ways of seeing the world. We're going to help you see the world that we see, right? And you don't have to accept what I see. I'm just going to give you what I see. And you can decide whether or not it makes sense to you. And it's because of this we've come to value 4 things. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Responding to change over following a plan. Now, this is Larry's thing. I'm saying that this part of the Agile Manifesto, this is just a reaction to waterfall, because the stuff on the right, that was the waterfall stuff, right? Waterfall was really big on process. Waterfall was really big on tools. What they're saying is, hey, processes and tools, okay, we may need some of that, but it's not as important as individuals and interactions. And I'm going to explain why in a little bit, why this is so important to what we do in software development and other knowledge work. Waterfall was big on comprehensive documentation. I tell every class, I tell the story. I was so excited when I used to have my own business. I did computer-based training development and website design way back when, like the early 90s. And I got this big contract with this big company whose name you recognize, but I'm not going to say it because I don't want to embarrass companies. I show up on the first day. I'm so excited to create computer-based training for their internal software that they're creating, right? And what do? Naive person that I am, I say, show me the software, right? Because if you show me the software, I'm going to learn the software, then I'm going to learn how to teach it. And I'm going to create my software that teaches your software. They said, well, we can't show you the software. But they literally walked me, like I was 6 years old, they almost took me by the hand, walked me over to a bookcase, and in that bookcase, there were a bunch of binders. You older folks will appreciate this, some of you. And they said, well, we don't have the software yet, but here's what it's going to do once it's built. They had all kinds of documentation, but not a stitch of working software. Contract negotiation. This is big, right? Because if you're going to do waterfall, what it ends up doing is you do what's called a fixed bid, fixed time, fixed scope project. You can't fix those things, by the way. Something's got to give. So what happens is you find out as you do things. I call this the Home Depot process, by the way, right? You have a project, you're going to go to Home Depot. You got it all figured out. You go to Home Depot and you get all your stuff and you come back and you start working the project. What do you find out? Everything that you didn't know, right? You got to go to Home Depot. Nobody goes to Home Depot once for a project, right? So what happens is you start this project where you've got this fixed time, fixed scope, fixed budget kind of thing. And you start doing the work. You say, oh my God, we've got this, this, and this, and this. And the client says, just do it. And you're like, hey, man, I got to get paid. So you have this thing, control, what do they call them? Control review boards or something? Contract review boards? You all been to one of those? Man, those are painful. And you're sitting on the opposite side of the table from each other, and you're trying to get more money from them, and they're trying to get more work from you, and it doesn't work out. It's better that you're on the same side of the table, because what you're doing should be for the benefit of the customer. It shouldn't be that you guys are, butting heads. So customer collaboration is much more important than contract negotiation. We're going to show you ways that this can make sense, right? Because you don't have to do fixed bid, fixed scope, fixed time kind of things. And then responding to changeover following a plan. Following a plan is malicious compliance. You ever heard that term before? That's how developers get back at you, by the way. If you ever work with software developers and you're on the business and you made them mad, you know how they get back at you? They do exactly what you told them to do. Malicious compliance. We don't want to follow a plan like lemmings over the cliff. We should pay attention to the changing needs of a business, because things are changing all the time. Does anybody know what the life cycle of appliances are these days? About 6 months, right? Things are constantly changing. You know that, right? Because you got rid of your MySpace account, I hope. Now you have Facebook, and it'll be something else next, right? Technology is constantly changing. In the time that we've been here together, just this morning, they've come up with 3 new JavaScript frameworks, I'm sure, right? Everything's changing so quickly. We can't just follow the plan, because the plan is obsolete almost once it begins. The military understands this, by the way. I worked with a quasi-military organization. We have some ex-military folks here, or maybe even active military folks here. Military gets this. If you read the great generals, they all say that, I think the quote is that the plan never survives the first contact with the enemy. I want to say it was Eisenhower, though I might get it wrong, who said it's not the plan that counts, it's the planning. Because you're constantly planning, because it's easy to prove. I used to do this with a class. If I had you in a classroom, I'd pick something that was, maybe 20 yards away. I don't know what that is in meters. Sorry, about 20 meters away. And I'd say, close your eyes and walk to it. Right? Why would you do that? Keep your eyes open. You can adjust along the way, right? Just simple. I mean, it's so simple to show you. You got to adjust with the times. Anyway, they said, appropriately, there's value to the stuff on the right, but you know what? We value the stuff on the left more. And the reason we do is because these are the things that could create more value, better software for our people. And this was particular to software, by the way. And I'm showing you the original. Now, there have been people who've come back and said, wait a minute, this applies not only to software, but it applies to any knowledge work. And so they've changed some of the wording, and you can do that in your head if you want to, if it makes you feel better. Instead of working software, working product. Right? You guys are smart enough to figure this out. There are 12 principles, and the principles I like, if I had to choose, I like them better than the values, because the values present this waterfall straw man and then tell me we like this better. The 12 principles talk to us about what we actually believe in. And I think it's really hard, if you look at these things, to disagree with any of them. Though I did work at one place where they found some of the principles hard to live up to, so they wrote their own principles, which I thought was pretty strange. And that's how I ended up writing a book about the Agile Manifesto, because I was offended. Because people are not stupid. That's one thing. If you get nothing else from this class, if you ever find yourself in management or leadership, don't assume your people are stupid. They're not stupid. They can figure things out. If you're going to rewrite the Agile Manifesto and create your own principles because you find some of them too hard to live up to, don't you think your people are going to figure it out? Right? They might, Google the Agile Manifesto, and then it just shows you, where you're lame. You use lame. Do we still use the word lame, or is the word lame itself lame? Don't know. Anyway, 12 values, right? 12 principles, sorry. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through the continuous delivery of valuable software. I want you to pay attention to the wording of some of this. If you want to know what's most important, customer. There's a guy named Steve Denning. He wrote a book called The Age of Agile. You might be familiar with him, Harvard Business Review. I think it's not Harvard Business Review, it's Forbes. He said the age of Agile is the age of the customer. And that's what it is. We're here for our customer, and we want to deliver not only early and valuable stuff, we want to do it continuously, right? We welcome changing requirements even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. Again, here, it's the pesky customer. That's the interesting thing about waterfalls. We kind of cut the customer out. We kind of cut the business out. We kind of said, much to our own detriment as software developers, we said, just tell us what you want and don't bother us for the next 9 to 12 months. Wasn't a very smart thing to do, right? We need to understand that there is a reason we're doing things, and the reason is the customer. We deliver working software frequently from a couple weeks to a couple months with a preference to the shorter time scale. And if you don't do software, we deliver working product frequently. I don't care, whatever you're delivering. Again, speed is important. We're going to talk about why speed is important a lot in this class. It's not just speed, though. The fourth principle is very, very near and dear to my heart. Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. It's prescriptive in the sense that it tells us who, it tells us what, and it tells us when. And those places that do not pay attention to this suffer the consequence. Business people and developers must. It's not optional. You need to be working closely together. If you do not work closely together, you will not be as successful. You will not be optimal. Will you succeed? Maybe. Will you make money? Maybe. Will you be optimal? No. You need to work as closely as possible with your business to understand. They understood motivation, though I'm not know that they're familiar with Dan Pink's book, Drive. It's towards the end of the class. We're going to talk about Drive. Drive is a wonderful book. You get a chance. There's some books we suggest you read along. I'm going to cover them, but reading the books are always better. Build projects around motivated individuals. Give them the environment and support they need and trust them to get the job done. This is really important. Knowledge workers are intrinsically motivated. Science tells us that. All you got to do is let them get out of their way, let them do their job. Make sure they have the environment they need. That's it. These folks knew it, I think, intuitively. I don't think they studied the science. It might not have existed back in 2001. I don't know. Most effective and efficient method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. There is so much that we get from face-to-face conversation. So much of what we do is non-verbal. Emails, texts, Slack messages, et cetera, do they convey information? Yes. Do they convey as much information as face-to-face? No. Is Zoom an alternative? Yes. What you're going to have trouble doing is if you have your developers working during the day while you're sleeping and vice versa. That doesn't work very well. And there's reasons for it. We'll talk about those reasons later. You want to know how you're doing? What's your primary measure of progress? Working software. If you're building, I don't know, cars, I guess it would be working cars. I don't know, whatever you're doing. It doesn't have to be software. You guys are smart. You'll figure out what the difference is. Agile processes promote sustainable development. There's this thing out there that I see a lot where they think agility is about speed. If you look at just the dictionary definition of the word agile, it's not just how fast we can do, it's how fast can we change in response to our environment. That's much different than just speed. It's the speed of successful change. And I want you to keep that in mind. Yes, speed is part of it, but it's the speed at which we can successfully change, which is different than just going fast. If we just go fast, especially in software development, if we just write a bunch of code and that code is, for lack of a better word, crap, all we've done is we've delivered more crap because we've been able to do it faster. That's not the point. So agile processes promote sustainable development. You're not agile unless you can change, and you can change successfully over time. Sponsors, developers, and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. Anyone through sweat equity, hard work, can be fast for a while, which is one of the reasons why I don't like the term sprint in Scrum, by the way, because you can't sprint over a long distance, right? Continuous attention. So it's not just let's shove some stuff out there quickly, because these two talk about it. The next one talks about it too. Continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhance agility. If you write quality code, if you create a quality product, if you build quality into what you're doing, you're actually going to be more agile. You're actually going to be able to move faster and move better. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. I'll keep it simple and not go into that. I think you can understand it. Best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. This is another thing that comes to us. We know that self-organizing teams are what engages people in their work. And again, I think this is something that they just knew because they were doing the work, right? And then you thought I'd never get to the end, but the 12th and final, and maybe my favorite one, is at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. This is the concept of retrospective in Scrum. This is probably the longest that anybody holds on these 12 principles and 4 values, but it's really important because this is your North Star. When I'm working with teams, I take my teams, if they'll allow me, through this same training that you have. And I'll tell them, look, the reason I'm telling you this and I'm spending time on it is this is our North Star. If anything I do as a coach or a Scrum Master contradicts any of the values and principles, you call me out on it. And if you find yourself in a place where you don't know quite what to do, where do you go? Go back to the values and the principles. I do that. As an Agile coach, I do that on almost a daily basis. I have to keep asking myself the question, is what I'm doing in line with these values and principles? And if the answer is yes, I'm probably headed in the right direction. And this is really important to know. Oops, I already went through them. Look at this. Forgot I had you could see them all in big glory. You could see them anyway, right? Let's move. Do. You think I hadn't done this before. So here's the question. Waterfall didn't work, but Agile seems to work pretty well with software development. I'm going to give you the reason why, because this presentation is pretty much about why. So why does Agile work and why doesn't Waterfall work? It seems like it should, right? It seems like it should work. It just doesn't seem to work very well. There's a couple times I say, if you only get anything, a couple words, I'm going to give you 2 words that are really, really important for today. The first one is the word complexity. Software development, knowledge work is generally complex. This is a framework called Cynefin. Comes to us from David Snowden, no relation to the guy who's in trouble as far as I know. He basically says that any work that you do, or that we do, falls into one of these categories. And the 2 at the bottom, chaotic and obvious, aren't things that we do. So it's really, for us, it gets really simple. We just need to ask ourselves the question, is what we're doing complex or complicated? Because chaotic is if you're an EMT, you work in chaotic. If you're a first responder, that's your mode. Obvious is stuff our customers are doing on their own. They're not going to buy our products to do it, right? So we can pretty much eliminate those. So it's like a 50-50 if we're playing Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Answer is me. It's kind of a rhetorical question. I think everybody wants to be a millionaire. So it's either one of the top 2. And the difference between it is in the complicated world, Waterfall actually works. But the complicated world is the world where we know ahead of time how things are going to work. And it's mostly a physical dominated world. So if we look at something like building a house, we've been building houses as human beings for a very long time. There are best practices. You can set up a blueprint. You can buy the materials. You can project the cost. You can project the time. You can be fairly accurate, assuming it doesn't rain a lot or something, right? Because ahead of time. There's best practices. Waterfall works well for this kind of stuff. But knowledge work, software development, where what we do is changing all the time, where we don't know what's going to happen, you know, we could try something and 5 different potential outcomes. We don't know what the outcome is going to be ahead of time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's complexity. And software development is complex. So what happens is if you take something that works for one of these quadrants and you try to apply it to another quadrant, you run into problem. That's what happened. We took waterfall, which kind of works for the complicated realm, stuck it in the complex realm, didn't work well. Works sometimes, about 1 in 3, give or take, right? So this is really important to understand. And most knowledge work is complex. We don't know ahead of time. You can think about it this way. There's like 7 or 8 different aspects of complexity. If you study complexity theory, which I have, I'm sure you don't want to hear all about complexity theory. You can look it up. One of those things is called nonlinearity, which is also known as the butterfly effect. Meaning the butterfly effect is a thought experiment. A butterfly flaps its wings in Central America and through a cascade of events causes a tsunami in, you know, Japan or something. That's complexity. That's nonlinearity, where the outputs are nonlinear to the inputs. Let me put it in the physical world. If you're building a apartment complex and you, for whatever reason, you're doing the plumbing or something like that, I don't know much about this kind of work, not my forte, but you screw up the plumbing, you're probably going to flood, you know, a few apartments or something like that. But the whole apartment complex is not going to fall to the ground. Right? That's linearity. The input and the outputs are about the same. But software development has a high degree of nonlinearity. I can change one input and I could take crash the whole system. Right? That's nonlinearity. That's just one aspect of complexity. That's a good one to understand. So if the outputs and the inputs are nonlinear, you're probably in the complex world. So if we're in the complex world, this is to me, like, for lack of a better word, the original sin of waterfall is it didn't take into account that, yes, it works for some things, but it doesn't work for all things. It doesn't work for knowledge work. It doesn't work for complex work. If you're in the complex world, how do you survive? How do you thrive? How are you optimal? I'm going to give you the next word that I want you to remember: feedback. And this is the problem with waterfall, is because waterfall intentionally removed feedback from the system. And when you don't have feedback in a complex system, man, you got real problems. Feedback works real well with complexity. If you're familiar with this is the Plan, Do, Check, Act, sometimes referred to as Plan, Do, Study, Act. It's a feedback loop, right? And feedback is critical in order to make sure we do things, because if you ever studied something, communication channels, which is basic feedback and knowledge work, right? Knowledge work is just people talking sometimes. I mean, we do every once in a while bang on a keyboard, put some stuff into code. But if we're doing software development, it's a lot more talking and communication and collaboration. The problem with this feedback based on communication channels grow geometrically or exponentially. I forget, I always get it wrong. I'm not a math major. If I have 4 people that need on a team, there's only 6 lines of communication. It's n times n minus 1 over 2. But if I double the number of people, I don't double the number of lines of communication. It grows, I think it's geometrically, even though I put exponentially. So as the team grows, it becomes harder and harder to get things done, because the bulk of the work, believe it or not, in a complex system is dependent on feedback, and feedback becomes more and more complex, right? So we need to know that. At Amazon's pretty good at writing software, because, you know, we all use Amazon, right? And they do a pretty good job of it. I mean, they're super logistics for one, but also super software development. They call it 2PT, which stands for 2 pizza teams. They said when a team gets big, too big, you know, that you can't, so big that you can't feed them with 2 pizzas, you got to break up the team. It's too big. It's pretty smart. I think it's really 3 PT, because I've worked with developers. I think they need more than 2, but anyway, you get the idea. Small teams vastly outperform large teams, by the way, in software development. And this isn't just something that we know. I mean, you might know it because you've worked in the field, but they've done studies from it. And there's a very interesting study that was done by an outfit called QSM Consulting. They have a database of 4,000 projects. They chose 564. So this is no small scale study. They chose 564 because they wanted projects of about the same size. And here's what they measured. They said, we're going to break these projects of the same size into two different categories, small teams and large teams. The small teams category was 5 or fewer, pretty small. The large teams were 10 or more, right? So you can think that one is like half the size of the other group, right? Now, if I were digging ditches in the physical world, or the obvious world, and I doubled the number of people, I'm going to get it done in roughly half the time, right? You with me? Does that happen in the complex world? Oh, no, it does not happen in the complex world, because here's what they found. The teams of 10 or more actually did it faster, but not a lot faster than the teams of 5 or fewer. So this is where, if there's any bean counters and accountants, my financial people, this is where they start paying attention. They're saying, wait a minute, we get more done with fewer people? That sounds pretty cool, because that's less money, right? Well, it's true. This is how I make my money, right? Remember, the companies pay me to help them make more money. This is part of how I make more money. Create smaller teams. The large teams completed these projects of about the same size in 8.92 months. Notice I had to go to 2 decimal places. The 5 or fewer completed in 9.12 months. So basically what we're saying is you're paying double or more the amount of money, and you're gaining about 10 days on a 9-month project. Is it worth it? It's not, right? It's not a good cost benefit analysis there, right? One of the things I want to talk about is don't confuse success with optimization. There's a lot of people here in California. If you've ever been to California, it's pretty crowded. A lot of them got here a long time ago on covered wagons. That was successful because there's a bunch of people here. I used to fly every week. Every time I look out the airplane window, I didn't see any covered wagons, right? Flying is optimal. Covered wagons are successful. Don't confuse the two. This is a problem because I get into organizations that have been doing waterfall. Well, we've been doing waterfall for years. We're still in business. We're successful. Yeah, but what could you have done? Right? What money are you leaving on the table? Because I can show you a way where you could do better. That's really the hardest thing here. When we talk about different lenses and things, is people have to be willing to accept those lenses. So if you think you're already successful, the odds of you actually listening to me are pretty slim. And that's a shame, because I think I can help. Okay, so we got this wonderful philosophy in the Agile Manifesto. The question is, okay, you've got this wonderful philosophy. How do I take this thing and make it part of my daily life? I don't care what you choose, be honest with you. Figure something out. But people have figured some things out. One of the things they figured out is something called Scrum. And Scrum is very popular. And there's this position called Scrum Master, which I spent a lot of my life doing. That is a good job. It's a fun job. It pays money. Some of you are looking for a good job that pays money, right? So you say, hey, try the Scrum Master thing. So let's talk about Scrum as Agile philosophy and practice. This is the definition that comes to us from Sutherland and Swaber. It says Scrum is a framework. It's not a process per se, it's a framework. There's a difference between a framework and a process. A framework says you do these things, but it doesn't tell you exactly how to do them. There's a lot of leeway, which is good. That's what you need in the complex world, right? So that you can react. So you build frameworks around things as opposed to saying, do this and then do that and then do this and then you're going to get that. No, it's saying, let's meet every once in a while and then we'll talk about things and we'll figure things out. It's a framework within which people can address complex adaptive problems. I'd love it when people agree with me. I said it's all about complexity, and here comes the word complex, right? Smart guys. Anyone who agrees with me is smart. That's my frame of reference. While productively and creatively delivering products of highest possible value. This is the real important thing, is value. I can't tell you the number of organizations, and you'll recognize some of the names. So I can't say them. I'd love to, but I can't. Where I walk in there and they never talk about the value they're delivering. All they talk about is the cost that it takes to deliver it. Right? It's all about delivering value. Scrum predates Agile. by 6 years. Scrum was actually introduced in 1995 at the OOPS conference in Austin, Texas. And I need to change my slide. Should I change it now? I don't know if I can change it now. I go back. They did it again. They keep changing it. They changed it in November of 2020. So when we go on the Friday discussion group, we're going to talk about that, what it used to be and what it is now. It's always changing, right? It's easy to understand, difficult to master. It's, I forget what it used to be, like 16 pages. I think they got it down to like 12, 13 pages now. They cut out a bunch of stuff. You can read it in an hour. You'll understand it. You might need 5 minutes to reflect on it. You'll understand it in 5 minutes, an hour and 5 minutes. The problem is not that it's easy to understand. The problem is it's really difficult to do. And the reason actually that it's difficult to do is that a lot of the companies you're going to work with and try to introduce it with, they've built their whole organization around waterfall. And they've built all their mental models around waterfall, which is more important, the lenses with which they see the world. And that needs to change in order to be successful. And it doesn't always happen. Organizational change is one of the hardest things you can do. Because organizational change is actually people change, human being change. Human beings don't like to change. Right? They'd rather be comfortable in their bubbles of being wrong than actually, challenge themselves on what they think, right? It's not how we work as humans. So that's why organizational change is hard, because human change is hard. Scrum framework is so simple, I could do it in one slide. You believe me? Haven't lied to you yet, far as you know. There's only 3 roles. That's pretty simple. Product owner, Scrum Master, and developers. They used to call it development team, but now they just call it developers. It makes sense. That's one of the changes that they made. I did actually change this slide, believe it or not. When I walk into an organization, sometimes I'm trying to help them with organizational change and moving them more towards Agile, and we're using Scrum, and I present this very same presentation or something similar to this presentation, and I can look in the crowd. Some of you might be doing it, but usually when I'm in an organization, I'm looking in the crowd and I see people and they're doing this in their head. They're saying, I'm not a product owner, I'm not a Scrum Master, and I'm not a developer. Holy smokes, Larry is trying to take my job away. And that's not a good thing for Larry, because people don't listen to you when they think you're going to take your job away. I'm not. There's a bunch of people who are interested in what these Scrum teams do. I refer to them all as stakeholders. They're people in accounting, they're people in leadership, the C-suite, directors, VPs, HR, architects, customers, right? All these people are stakeholders. They're interested in what we do. I'm not coming for your job, is what I tell them. There's a place for everyone. Here's the thing. People have ideas. We have them all the time, right? I usually have like three good ideas before I take a shower, and then I forget them. You ever do that too? You have great ideas, and then you forget it like right away as soon as you leave the room. But if you have those ideas, you happen to remember them, can come from anywhere. What do you do with these ideas? You've got a software product, you got an idea how to enhance it. You give it to somebody that's called a product owner. And that product owner does a very simple thing. Product owner takes what you give him or her, puts it in the backlog. We call it a backlog. It's a to-do list. We work with products and software, so we call it a product backlog. It could, in some cases, be a project backlog, but that's squishy. We'll get into the difference between project and product, but that's simple. Sometimes we call these things stories, but they're just PBIs, I think is what they say in the Scrum Guide, product backlog items. Here's the thing. We're going to continuously, because the world is always changing, the world is complex, we need to understand the work. We're going to continue to refine this. There used to be a word that they used, which was called grooming, which has a bad connotation in the UK. So they stopped using the word grooming. So if you're using the word grooming, stop using it, because it tells me that you haven't paid attention to the Scrum Guide for the last 7 years, which is not good if you're looking for a Scrum Master role. They call it refinement. You're going to continuously refine that backlog. And we're going to talk about that in day 2. It's very exciting. You're going to like it. What we're going to do is we're going to ascertain somehow the value and effort that it takes to do the work, and we're going to sequence it. If I had to pick 3 words that I want you to get: complexity, feedback, and sequencing. We're going to sequence the work because the timing of the work is critical in Scrum. in Agile. Timing of the work is not critical in Waterfall because we do the whole big batch and then move the whole big batch, so it doesn't matter when we do things. That's one of the different lenses or mental models or ways of looking at the world, is when we do things is important, not important in Waterfall. Once we have this thing in sequence, we're going to continually refine the work that's at the top of the backlog, the stuff that's sequenced first. And we're going to get some detail about it. There's no sense going into detail about everything like you would in Waterfall. We only go into detail about the stuff that we might do next, because the stuff that's at the bottom may never get done. So why are we talking about it, right? And then once we've done those two things, once we put it in sequence, and once we have a good idea of what we're about to do, we're going to take those things, we're going to put them into a smaller backlog that's referred to as the sprint backlog. Now, a sprint by definition is either 1, 2, 3, or 4 weeks. If you're doing more than 4 weeks, you're not doing Scrum. By definition. I don't think that's changed in the Scrum guide. Maybe it has. Either way. In most places, it's 2 weeks. In my day job, it's 2 weeks. You're going to say, of this stuff that we know that's at the top, that's in the right sequence, we can do this much. And you're going to take and put it on that smaller backlog. And that's called sprint planning. And that's one of the events and ceremonies. And then you're going to do this thing called the sprint itself, which is just the container. I plan it, I start it, boom. Every day I'm going to have what's called a daily Scrum. That's where we're going to sometimes call it a stand-up. That's where we're going to spend a short time together and we're going to talk about the work that we're doing. It is actually a status meeting. It's about the status of the work. It's not a true status meeting, or at least how status meetings have become. Most status meetings are not about the status of the work. They're about the status of the people in the meeting, right? You know the difference. I want to remind you that you report to me. Tell me what you're doing. It's not about that. It's about, are we moving the work through the system? Are there things in our way? So we usually answer some questions during that. We'll talk about that more in detail. At the end, I got to change this to a circle. It's a square. It should be a circle because it's a feedback loop. We're going to have a review. We're going to take those stakeholders and the people who care about what we're doing. We're going to show them what we did. And we're going to say, hey, here it is. Does it look good? Was it what you wanted? That's really important. Because in Waterfall, we would spend 9 months working in our closet, and then we'd show it to them 9 months later and say, here's what we did. Is it what you wanted? And they say, nope. Well, too late. We got to deliver it, right? So we have these frequent feedback loops that are saying, hey, we did what you said you wanted. Here it is. Is it really what you wanted? And this is an opportunity for them to say yes, which is good, to confirm it, or even sometimes better, no. Because now we can fix it. Because we're not waiting 9 months to show them. And then we're also going to have this event called the Sprint Retrospective. How can we work together better? How can we work together better to deliver value to our customers with quality sooner? That's the crux of agility. Value to our customers quickly and with quality. And then there's this person called a Scrum Master who's overseeing all of it. Scrum Master used to be referred to as a servant leader. They changed the wording, but I still like it. What is a servant leader? How many people are parents out there? If you're a parent, you're probably a servant leader, right? You care more about your kids, and you're going to do what you need to do to ensure their success, not yours, theirs. That's a servant leader, right? Because you can't tell me you enjoy changing diapers. If you do, you're weird. I don't care who you are, right? That's servant leader. You do what's necessary for the team so that the team can be successful and the people of the team can be successful. What are the three things I'm looking for as a Scrum Master and a coach? The things I'm looking for first are these three things: transparency, predictability, and value. Because the purpose of the Scrum framework, if you think about it, if you're saying, hey, what I'm doing is complex and complexity needs feedback, is I've created a framework that has feedback built into it, right? So we can be successful because we need this feedback, right? So I don't talk a lot about risk. This is one of the things we talk a lot about in Waterfall is you talk about risk. Why? Because it's risky and invites failure. So you have to manage risk. How do you manage risk in Agile? It's built into the framework. So the only risk of Scrum Really. And this is what I tell people, even in my day job. The only risk of doing Scrum is not doing Scrum. Because if you stop doing the events and ceremonies and you're not doing them properly, what you're doing is you're removing feedback from the system. When I remove feedback from a complex system, I increase risk. So I don't talk about risk, because this is probably the only time you hear me even mention the word risk. We're going to take care of it. How are we going to take care of it? Well, if we're doing Scrum, we're going to do Scrum, right? So all we're doing is we created this system where there's a bunch of feedback loops, which I just showed you in my single slide, right? And the three main benefits that the business is going to get is transparency, predictability, and value. Transparency. We know what we've done because we've already delivered it, right? Here's what we've done. Here's what we're doing now. This is the other problem with waterfall. Is waterfall, you're always 90% done for, like, you know, the first 10% in the project, you're 90% done, and then you're 90% done for the remaining 90%. You never know where you are. It's a bastion of opacity. You never know where you are. And then, you know, if you're doing big bang approach, you try to deliver everything on one day. You don't know whether it's going to work or not. Agile, you're delivering small pieces all along the way. So it's very transparent. Here's what I've done. I know I've done it because it's already delivered and the customer's already using it. Here's what I'm doing now, right? Almost radical transparency. Predictability is, here's where we can go. Not here's what we're going to do. That's what waterfall tries to do, which is not possible. Here's what we're capable of doing in the future. We'll talk about that tomorrow on how we do that. Predictability is huge. It's a hallmark for business. If you're going to be optimal in business, you have to have some idea of what the future holds. And even then, you're not going to have a perfect idea of what the future holds. That's why we need to be able to be, quote unquote, agile, right? Because, you know, the joke is, who had pandemic on the 2021 list, or the 2020 list, sorry. Nobody did, right? So what do? If we're agile, hey, we do a good job. We can roll with the punches, so to speak. The third thing is value. I'm going to, through this class and some of the techniques I'm going to show you, we're going to pay attention to value, because value is important to our customer. It's also very important to the people doing the work, right? When you're doing work, when you're doing knowledge work, you want to know, what is the value I'm delivering? I can't tell you the number of teams I work with who have no conception of value when I walk in the door. They know what the effort is. They don't know what the value is. Man, I'll tell you what, I got this thing down. I thought I wasn't going to make it to the end today, but I think I'm going to make it. This is the last slide. Here's the thing. Agile solves the right problems. Agile helps us to be optimal. Agile helps us solve these mental models, these lenses, these frameworks, these ways of looking at the world, helps us to solve the world of complexity, the world of knowledge work. It's an interesting story. I like this story. I had nowhere else to put this quote, so I put it on the last slide, because I think that, to me, this is waterfall. This is, Mencken says, for every complex problem, there's an answer that's clear, simple, and wrong. That was waterfall. It was clear. It was simple. It was wrong. It doesn't work for complex knowledge work. It just doesn't. It's not the right fit. Can you deliver something? Yeah. Can you stay in business? Yep. Are you optimal? Far from it. Not even close. Here's something that I would consider to be a complex problem. I want to solve the problem of human-powered flight. And this was something that a gentleman named Henry Kremer, I guess, was interested in, because he put his money where his mouth is. In 1959, he established what he called the Kremer Prize. I guess if you're going to give the prize, you can put your name on it, right? So the Kremer Prize. What was the Kremer Prize? I'm going to be able to, through human power alone, fly 1 mile on a figure-8 course. That's the important part, right? Because anybody can glide for 1 mile. And I'm going to give you the equivalence of $1 million. Pretty good. Like, who wants to be a millionaire? Me. Yay. 18 years, that prize, people tried to get that prize, get that $1 million. And they failed. And here's the reason that they failed, is they used a lot of the thinking that I would call waterfall thinking. They viewed it as a problem that was either obvious or complicated. They didn't realize that the problem was complex. And that prize sat unclaimed for a very long time until this guy named Paul McReady. He was McReady for the challenge. He said, here's the problem. Y'all don't know what the problem is. I don't know if he used the words complexity or something like that, but you don't know what you're doing. You don't understand the problem. If you don't understand the problem, how are you going to solve it? This is a complex problem. So he understood that the key was, how can I build these, ultralight crafts quickly? Because I need feedback. Because this is something that nobody's ever done before. So let me be a little bit more scientific. Let me be empirical. Let's try something. Let's see what happens. And let's take that and use that knowledge to adjust the plane. I don't know if they're called planes, right? To adjust what we're doing. They got to a point where they could, make adjustments and do 2 or 3 flights a day. Whereas the other groups, they spent all their time, doing waterfall stuff. So at the end, they had, this perfect machine that was going to work, and it didn't. But they spent all their time and all their money trying to create the perfect machine. So they got to the end, they gave up. These guys said it probably ain't going to work. So I'm just going to try something, hopefully not kill anybody in the process, but I'm going to try something, and then I'm going to learn from it. And then I'm going to make adjustments. And they got to a point where they were doing, 3 or 4 flights a day. They were making adjustments, reconfiguring the machine, whatever. Within 6 months, they got the prize. There was a second prize that was double that to cross the English Channel, and they got that as well, McReady and his team. And I love this story because that's, for one, there's more to this story. I feel like, was I Paul Harvey? And now for the rest of the story. When I was a young man, I went to Washington, D.C. with my family on a vacation. And we went to the Smithsonian Institute. And we went to the hall. I think it's called the Hall of Flight. I could be wrong. You got to remember, it was a long, long time ago. Anyways, we go to this place. I see this thing, this picture that you see on your screen now. This is the Gossamer Condor. And it's hanging there along with the Apollo space capsules or whatever, and the missiles and blah, blah, blah. Wright brothers plane, probably. I had no idea what it was. So it's pretty cool all these years later when I'm studying complexity and I'm trying to, come up with examples, that I come across this story of McReady, because now I know what this is all about, right? Isn't that pretty neat? So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.